Hey, what's going on? My name is Thomas Ian Nicholas. Of course, you might know me as Kevin from the American Pie movies, or Hen, Ree, Ree, Row, Wen, and Gar, Gar, Ner, Ner from Rookie of the Year. You are watching Spotlight Report, and if you want to know more about my band, then you should listen up. I will see you in Australia soon.
And that sounds like a lot of work.
Here's to the next step.
This bed is on fire.
First question is pretty obvious. Looking back, did you ever expect American Pie to become this social culture, pop culture icon when you guys start filming it? You expect the success and doing four movies after that?
I mean, at the time, I was just, happy to have a job. So, but it's so amazing that it's still, you know, still it's still liked, and that we did get to do so many films. And it's crazy to me to think that this has become a $1 billion franchise. I never would
Mm.
have thought when we were making, a teen comedy back in the late '90s that I would be here and traveling all the way to Australia to do a 25th anniversary screening. I'm also stoked because of getting to do these two screenings with movie nerds in Sydney and Melbourne. I'm going to be playing some shows in between those dates, and doing a show on the Gold Coast, and playing a show in Melbourne, and then playing at a festival in Cowra. So I'm excited about all these things.
Well, I mean, you're a very busy man, producer, musician, actor, father. And speaking about father, your son was on Old from Shyamalan. That might be like a kind of complete circle, very mind-blowing thing because it's a Shyamalan movie. And you also started at a very young age. If I'm not mistaken, you started like around 6 years old acting and stuff like that. I think your kid was 9 when he did Old or something like that. And if I'm not mistaken. So how was when you guys got the call and say, hey, he's on Old with Shyamalan. How was you?
It's
How did you like that? What happened?
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, Nolan started acting around the same age as me. His first job was on a TV series with Zoe Deschanel and Jake Johnson called New Girl, and he
Hmm.
played their son. So he worked hard at it. He's been going to his acting classes, developing his technique, and doing the auditions. I, of course, help his audition process, but I remember at the time we were in full lockdown, so all we could do for auditions was just put things on tape. And I
Hmm.
remember when he got that role, it was pretty cool. It was also like a good mental break for us to get out of the house. The kids weren't even going anywhere, but then suddenly I was taking my son all the way to the Dominican Republic.
Um, your background is more like drama, for what I can see in your repertoire, in your CV. You are doing a lot of drama. However, probably your two biggest films, the American Pie franchise, of course, and Rocky of the Year, are not really in that sort of spectrum. So, how do you balance that, and how do you think is the comedy is helping you that much in your career?
It's one of those funny things where when I started acting at the age of 6, drama was my forte. And I remember in acting school, the my coach and mentor sort of had this idea. He said, or not this idea, but he instructed me. He said, "You can only be as strong as your weakest link." And so he wanted me to work on my comedic skills, to hone them more so that I could just improve myself overall as an actor. And in doing so, I think if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have booked Rookie of the Year.
Mm.
And then I think the success of that film, lent itself to me getting American Pie. So it's one of those funny things where drama is what I love, and what comes naturally to me, and I have to work really hard at comedy. So but at the same time, I really just love being in all forms of entertainment and creation, whether it's acting or producing or making music or touring with my band. I just love living in that space.
I think it was like almost 10 years ago, something that most of the cast was here down under. It was like Klein, Jason Biggs, Stifler, Eugene, Mina, and Tara were here. I have the pleasure to meet them all, and I have never seen a more down to earth gang because you expected like funny people, maybe in front of the screen they're funny, but outside they're not that good. They're the coolest dudes ever. They're like super kind, down to earth people. But you were missing in that tour. So what happened last time? Why you couldn't be here?
I don't know. I mean, Universal had different sort of ideas of who should go where. I
Mhm.
don't think they realized that my grandmother was born in Australia and that I'm
Mm.
related to Ned Kelly. So I think I would have done well to be in Australia.
Really?
Uh, but instead, they sent me to Mexico and Spain
Uh,
by myself. So they obviously just wanted to do whatever worked well for the film to get the work because obviously not everyone can be everywhere, and they obviously have market reports on who is valuable in what territories. I'm sure,
Mhm.
but this just the same now I get to come once again by myself. So
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool.
All this, let's speak about these shows that you're gonna do with movie nerds and stuff like that. What fans of the franchise and of your career can expect from these Q&As and shows?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're gonna, live all the nostalgia by rewatching the film in a theater. And even though
Mhm.
people have and can see the films, at home, there's nothing like a theater experience of a movie. And then obviously, movie nerds, we've put together some things for VIP meet and greets and upgrades. And there's a lot of opportunities to get selfies and spend some time hanging out. And if the place fills up enough, I think we're gonna throw a little bit of an after party. And so there's a real opportunity. I mean, because I'm gonna be there live in person. So I couldn't think of like if I was a fan of a as a fan of any kind of film to get to go and meet the people that made the movie. I think is a cool opportunity, especially when we're not necessarily close by to one another. Los
Mhm.
Angeles to Sydney's pretty far away.
Mhm. What's the most common question so that fans ask you about the film, about being on the film?
Well, you already talked about how down to earth the cast is. I think a
Mhm.
lot of people want to know whether or not we're all really friends, and we all do get along really well, especially when all of us are together. It's a lot of fun. So I think that's probably a big question is whether or not we're all really friends. Another thing that people talk about is will there be an American Pie 5? And I certainly hope that there will be because I would love the opportunity to hang out with my friends again.
Well, that was the question I have. American Pie 5. You have plenty of things to keep doing there. However, thinking about the topics and how American Pie was made and all the sequels, the world has changed a lot. It's a lot of like politically correctness now. Do you think if American Pie would be done in this time and age, would have been the same thing?
The funny thing is that all existed back then too, and we actually couldn't make this movie back then as well. I
Okay.
mean, the incept of PC terms started in the mid 90s,
Mhm.
5 years before we even did this movie. And I remember us fighting to even have an R rating. The MPAA wanted to give us an NC-17.
Well,
And so they kept like changing things in the movie and cutting certain moments of scenes and changing dialogue just to get it down enough. But we were pushing the envelope back then and saying and doing things that you really shouldn't say and do, especially in a theatrical movie. So there's this idea that I think we forget because maybe there's not as much evidence. I mean, we were only at the start of the internet. We still
mhm.
had dial-up connection back then. Not everyone had the internet. Not everyone had, an email address.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't think we could have made the movie back then the same way that it is now. So I think both are true. So in understanding that, I think the same could be said for, that's the basis of comedy.
Mhm.
Comedy is going a little bit too far.
Yeah, true.
So, and then it's funny because if it's not, then it's safe and then it's not a comedy.
Mhm. Your van is super cool, man. I really enjoy what you guys do. So can you tell me about how this project started? This was your main project or acting was your main project and why you want to be remembered, the Thomas Nicholas, the actor, the musician.
I started acting when I was about 6 years old, and I started playing guitar when I was about 14. but I want to be remembered for both.
Hmm.
I've released officially 7 albums, but technically I've done 11 of them. There's just a few that I've, in the beginning that I kind of got rid of, um, the learning process. But I think when my band landed a song on the soundtrack album of the fourth American Pie movie on American Reunion, it opened up a lot of doors for us. And, I've played probably over 1,200 shows at this point over the last 15 years. Last year, I played 115 shows in 4 countries.
Wow.
Um, and so, and now I'll be expanding into playing in Canada for the first time in about 12 years, and coming to Australia to do these screenings. I'm going to be playing shows in between. So I'm going to be doing some shows in Sydney, in Melbourne, in Burleigh Heads over on Gold Coast, and also in Cowra. So I'm definitely, I'm not changing my MO. I'm going to be just as busy in Australia as I am in the United States.
Which one would you say was the band that said like, "Wow, I wanted to play music"? Which was the band that got you into music?
It was Nirvana for sure.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I mean, when in '94 I was in junior high school, and that was like that and Green Day were like the first 2 bands that I started learning, their music, and how to play and reading tabs and learning their songs on guitar. I think it really stemmed from the idea that I grew up listening to my mom's collection of '70s rock, which I still love. Um, but when Kurt Cobain died, there was a kid at my school that did a week of silence, and he was the only kid that was in a band, but he was a total slacker. Like he never had good grades. He never seemed like he cared about anything. But when Kurt Cobain died and he did a week of silence, he got sent to the principal's office like every single class every day that week, and he
Wow.
didn't say a word. And I kind of realized, at 14, like the power of music. And
Hmm.
and then I suddenly saw the guitar in the corner of the apartment that belonged to my mom, and my friend's dad showed me some chords. I think the first song I learned on guitar was "If" by Bread,
Mhm.
and and then just never put down the guitar ever since. I was that kid when it like 14, 15, 16 who just always had a guitar with him. Like I traveled everywhere with my guitar. You can ask any one of my friends that, that know me from back then. I was the guy that always had a guitar.
Looking back and speaking about this tour, what will you remember about your first day on set of American Pie? What was your first scene? What do you remember about that day?
Man, I don't even remember what the first day was because my first memories come from rehearsal of
Hmm.
writing my backstory of the character with Paul and Chris Weitz and having rehearsals with Tara Reid and uh, you know uh, leaving the rehearsal space to go and grab sushi or whatever. I remember I had a pickup truck at the time, and I had one of those cabs that covered the back, and there's only 2 seats in the front. So it was me and Paul Weitz, and then Chris Weitz and Tara Reid in the back of my truck as we drove to get sushi. So just lots of fun memories and just really having a great time. Like it was so much fun to be on that set. It was like 7 weeks of shooting and just, having a great time.
In comedy films, there is always a scene that stays, even though it was not scripted. Did American Pie have that?
Um, I'm trying to remember if the first film I mean, I know there was definitely some improv moments. Um, my my favorite one, so like obviously me and the boys, we would always kind of like challenge each other to do things or do funny things. I remember us like talking Chris Klein into doing like the Bruce Lee mouth. You remember when he was like, when he's like, we must fight for every man out there. And like it's like, we must fight and find out who is number one. And we're like, oh, you got to do the mouth thing. Like, when you're like, we must fight and find out
Yeah.
who was number one. Like that wasn't in the script, but we're like, dude, you got to do it. He's like, no, man, I don't know if I can. And then we're like, no, you got to do it. So it was like a total dare that he did that moment, and Jason and Eddie and I were like pushing him to do it. So there's little moments like that that I remember that weren't in there that we all kind of like came up with. Like even later on with like American Reunion, the bit with Sean sticking his fingers in my mouth, that was my idea. And I was like, I told him like on the side, like, don't say anything to anybody, but do this bit. He's like, oh no, man, I can't do that. I was like, yeah, you can. It's gonna be fun. You got to do it.
Do you guys read the whole script when you did the film? Do you guys knew that Jason would be effing a pie at that stage, or you didn't know really?
Oh
Or
no, no, we yeah, you
was
we
everyone
knew
on
we
set
knew that
looking
was
at
happening.
was everyone on set looking at that scene to film or not? Do you wait to
No,
wait?
no, it's whenever there's any kind of nudity or so it's always like what you call a skeleton crew where
Okay,
you can't have any looky-loos. I mean that it was the same way for all of our our
yeah,
big scenes as
yeah.
well.
Just to finish, mate, any message for all the fans ahead of the tour?
I'm excited to finally get over there to Australia. I've been trying to put together an Australian tour for years. And when I say years, I mean like I visited my family in 1990 in Fremantle, but in 2016 I tried to come over for a tour. And now all my friends are touring over there. Less Than Jake has been on tour in Australia. Bowling for Soup was just there.
Yeah.
Wheatus is coming over around the same time as me. So I'm so stoked that this is finally happening, and I look forward to seeing people at these shows. And I hope that this will be the first of many times that I get to come to Australia.
Hey, big boy.
Oh my God.
American Pie.
You know, I forgot you've been there and back.
I've learned about it in sex ed, so I really don't need you to sit here and talk.